in this crazy world. Life is so short, but so...
Hello, this is Eddy Hajas, and this is the Eddy Hajas Tiny House Experience. This video that I'm doing today is going to go over my overall construction process and design process. And the audience that I'm trying to reach are people that are just trying to get information and an idea of what kind of considerations they should be looking at when thinking about going tiny. So I'm going to start with what I at least know and how I interpretate the zoning and a little bit of the local law, or just the laws in general about tiny houses. You're going to see tiny houses usually come into two different categories. One, there'll be an RV category, and this is actually built to RV code, which makes it mobile. And there's another category that's actual mobile home category. Mobile homes are a little bit more permanent. They're legitimate to live in full-time, whereas an RV is technically not legal to live in full-time. Although if you're out in the country like this, it's definitely doable, and people aren't really out to look for people living in RVs. Or you can choose not to build to any code, and then you're just kind of like in your own, I guess what people say, gray area category of living, if you choose to do that. But the real question with that whole zoning thing really comes down to the land that you're on. And the land actually has to be zoned and certified as an RV park, and that'll make it legitimate to live on, or a mobile home park. And that's, I think, where probably a lot of the conversation has to continue to go on, and that's where it's really hard for even developers that want to go that way to get those permits. Or the other option is you just find people with land outside of a city, most likely, and you can sit up there and live. So I'm not going to go into that any more in depth. There's a lot of resources online that you can find more information. As far as when you're just looking to build one of these or design one of these, the thing that I think is most important by far before you even start building is you want to really keep the end in mind. In particular, there's certain appliances that you're gonna really want to have picked out, rather than just, you can put the house together, but if you make some decisions, it's going to be really hard to maybe accommodate certain things. A couple of the items that I would suggest really researching and choosing, your hot water tank, very important, because it's going to have clearance requirements, and it might be very hard to fit in the water tank that you choose after the fact. The sink, the size of your sink, what kind of toilet you're going to use, where your electrical panel box, where you're going to put that. Heating and air conditioning probably be pretty good considerations. But I'd recommend trying to have the entire thing designed, built, research that all of your appliances are going to work in their spaces, and maintain the correct and adequate clearance requirements in regards to that. There are some 3D softwares. There's one 3D software called SketchUp you can use to build and design and figure out space. It is a lot of work if you're going to get on that route, or just get graph paper, sketch up your basic plan. I'd also recommend getting feedback from friends. If you're living in an apartment or a house, I would also even just saying tape off an area, a 20-foot area by whatever, 7-foot, whatever interior space, to get an idea of what it's going to feel like to move in that in a really small space like this, and if it's going to work for you or not. I was already a minimalist, so like getting rid of stuff, that wasn't part of my process, but I'd also say that's going to be a major consideration before you're going to before seriously starting the investment and the time that you're going to go through in the tiny house process. I'm going to talk a little bit about the tools that that I had to use to build this tiny house. I grew up around construction. I had an uncle that I worked summers with for a couple years. I just was a laborer. I used tools very little, but I was around them and I felt comfortable using tools. So there might be a little bit of a learning curve that you have to go through if you've never used tools. There's a lot of really good safety videos online. I would recommend looking and reading the entire manual of any tool that you purchase. That's what I've done. And you're going to have to factor in, there's going to be, you're going to have to spend a little bit of extra time learning to use the tools properly. Now, I've read that some people say you only need like 5 tools to build a tiny house, and usually the things that show up on that are cordless drills. I highly recommend just invest a couple $100s in really solid cordless drills. You're going to use them every single day. Definitely need a miter saw. One thing about the miter saw that I bought a 10-inch miter saw, and you can see the cedar bevel siding on my house. It's 7 inches wide, and that miter saw didn't go through the entire material. Every cut that you see on that siding, I had to flip it over and cut the other side, which is just ridiculously long process. If I knew that at the beginning, I'd have spent $100 extra and got a 12-inch miter saw, and I'd have probably at least saved a couple weekends without a doubt. But you'll definitely need a miter saw. You'll need a circular saw for cut, like, you know, doing plywood and sheeting rips. What else is there? A jigsaw, I'd say, is pretty important. I think those are on everyone's list. You'll need an assortment of hand tools that I'm not going to get into. Some are obvious, like hammers, screwdrivers, and the likes. But the other things that I highly recommend is getting a cheap table saw. Actually, the table saw that I use is over there. It's a Ryobi table saw, and is about $120, fairly cheap. I got it in the middle of my project, and it would have saved me a lot of time if I just bought it up front. And pneumatic nail gun can save you a lot of time. I did buy a framing gun. A router is a really good tool to have, especially if you're going to do furniture on the inside of your house. And a grinder is also a good tool to have, just to grind down nails and things like that. So this trailer that I purchased here, I purchased it through tinyhomebuilders.com, Dan Luche's company. This is a 20-foot trailer. The trailers out there made right now are a lot better. There's a lot of options. They get customized, and a lot of different companies that are doing it. But a couple things on a trailer. If I had to build this house completely over again, I would have actually bought a 24-foot trailer and still more or less built a 20-foot house on top of it. This utility shed right here, it's actually cantilevered off of the back of my trailer. My trailer ends about right here, and then it comes out another about 10 inches. They're just the frames of my subfloor. The subfloor is a 2x4 subfloor with rigid foam panels in between the stud bays, or the bays of the subfloor, and this comes out about another 12 inches. So it's not being supported by anything on the bottom. Some things that it's good to keep this open, especially if you're having propane canisters back here, and it lets the propane gas escape if you had a leak or something like that. The one problem that I came into whenever I was getting to framing out this trailer was at 10 inches it didn't have enough space to actually put my propane tanks in here. And I thought that I could just put the propane tanks outside, but I'm like, this is going to be such a beautiful place, like, do I want to have exposed propane tanks? So that's why I kind of built this coming out. This is a long process to put these angles together. This probably literally added like 2 weekends. It looks like a very small amount of work, but with someone like me that didn't really have construction experience, it was tough. But now that it's built, this is definitely my favorite feature of the outside of the house, without a doubt. I think it gives it a nice character, and every time I look at it, I just remember how much what a struggle and how much work I had to put into it to get to this point. Another thing with these trailers, I have 3-ton jack stands at all the corners. Now you can get trailers that have the jack stand already on it. I've heard pros and cons about those. Sometimes when you're moving them around, if that jack stand gets caught on something, it will bend it, and it's going to be really hard to level it after that case. You have the convenience of having the jack stand on all the time. That, you know, that's a good thing. But these are pretty easy to use. This is really what I'd recommend, just getting jack stands. They're easy to, yeah, it's still very easy to level. You can see that I have them on pieces of wood. I'm not really sure if that's the best thing or not, but they seem to be working. Or you can use some sort of blocks. But you could also get like pieces of plywood if you had to bring it up or down to level it. The other thing on this hitch side right here, I have a hitch lock. This is about $50. You can get them for like $30. I'd recommend just putting a lock on it. I don't know what type of person would want to steal a tiny house. It'd have to have a big truck to probably move it. But you know, it's just an insurance policy that's fairly cheap to use. One other thing I wanted to add about the trailer specifically is that a lot of people, when they build the entrance in their house, they'll cut away into the house square footage, and they'll put a covered kind of a covered entrance area into the house, which is great. It keeps you out of the weather. I'm not a big fan of it, mainly because you're already working with such a tight space. That 3x3 area, I think, ends up making your house a lot smaller than it can be. What I am a big fan of is just creating a freestanding deck, so this isn't tied into the house. I was going to do a 3-foot deck. This is a 5-foot deck. I'm really happy I went with a 5-foot deck. It's very comfortable to sit out here. 3 feet isn't too wide to move and to walk and get around on. And plus, this can just, these legs, I can take them off. I can put it in the back of a full-size truck, and it's very easy to move around. So this would be my recommendation for a porch and not to take up space in your house.
Cause all we need is the power of love, so we'll rise up above and set our souls free. You ain't got nothing on me. I'll say you ain't